My name is Lauren Hawkins. I'm a property owner in Fayetteville. And I really want to thank Vivian and everyone who's spoken. I really want to thank the city staff and the Environmental Action Committee because I think you put together a great resource and are showing us a way to help us keep our property in good shape. Thank you. I strongly support this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What? Tell me your name.
Lauren?
Okay, Lauren. Okay. Thank you. I didn't catch your name.
Hawkins. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm Barbara Cossack, and I live on Beaver Lake. We have a problem with the trees and woody growth. They do die. The dying trees or stumps have roots that decay and leave a series of small waterways called piping by the experts. Termites help with the disintegration of the roots. The water draining through this piping erodes the bank. If my farmer in Iowa planted a tree anywhere near the stream on my property, I'd fire him. The U of A of Iowa teaches deep-rooted grass, well-maintained, is better than any riparian along the side of a river or stream. Stops the runoff better, stops the erosion better. Okay, yes, there are snakes, some of them are poisonous, but the more danger are the ticks that will enjoy the habitat you are creating. We live on Beaver Lake and have for 30 years. Our family has had 4 cases of Lyme disease before we finally discovered we were trapped on our land. Stay behind the fence where you've mowed. We don't get ticks. I have Labradors. They run on the land. They don't bring back ticks. I take them down to the lake. We come back covered. 30 years ago, a retiring entomologist, doctor, I cannot remember his name, from the University of Arkansas, told me you could eliminate 95 to 98% of ticks simply by planting grass and maintaining the mowed area. We walk through the mowed acres, do not pick up any ticks, but if we dare to go down to the core, we are covered. You're creating a dangerous habitat for the people, the children that are going to play around that, and do some more study on it. Don't take people's land to create something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Thank you, Mayor. Gracie Leach Pendleton. I am a true blue native of Fayetteville, Arkansas. Graduated and went to school with several people on the behind the desks. And I just want to know, you all have the pictures of Pyrite Drive still? Well, the one that has the corner, I don't know where they are. Or did you throw them away?
No, I looked at them last night and online.
Okay. Well, the house that's on the corner with the little yellow line that shows the city of Fayetteville inside my house, I take offense to that. I'm sorry. I don't see that this is going to, the ditch behind my house was not there when I moved in. Crystal Drive did not even go through to Raven when I moved in. It was 06, I believe, when I moved in. There was construction behind my house. They were building all that back there. I dealt with construction trailers for 6 or 8 months behind there while they went ahead and finished Raven and Tiger Eye, and I take care of my yard. I mow my yard, I weed eat my yard, I push mow my yard, and from that drainage ditch, you're in my house, 50 feet. And I have a hard time with that. I feed the birds, I take care of my little animals and critters, but the snakes aren't going to come in my yard. I'm going to take care of them. But if I want to resurrect the dead in my backyard, I want to do it. And, you know, if I get out there and dig a hole, I'm going to dig a hole. If I want to plant a tree, I'm going to plant a tree. Now, if y'all want to buy my house, I'll sell it to you, and then you all can tell me what to do. But I'm not for this, and that creek is not a creek. It's just a drainage ditch from 2 stock ponds that used to be on Alzacani's property. And it's just a runoff. It's not doing any damage. And who's going to keep it cleaned out? Are y'all going to clean it out? No, the drainage ditch.
Hang on.
Who cleans out the
What about
drainage
maintenance
ditch?
on that?
In most cases, it's the property owner who cleans out the waterways. Unless there's an easement, the city rarely.
It's the city's, it's not mine.
If there's an existing easement, then the city does clean out, maintains the drainage capacity.
Well, I've had to call for the last 4 years. I've had to call the city and have them come out there and clean out all of the gunk that comes down, that grows in that drainage ditch, from cattails, and they take out. And one of your little city guys said, I saw the biggest water moccasin, he said, I've ever seen in my life down there. They've got to keep that cleaned out. We can't, there's no way we can clean out a 25, how big is that ditch? it's
a big ditch.
There's no way you can clean it out. I've got 4 culverts that convey right there at that bridge behind my house. And in one section of it, it's only 11 feet. So I'm very much against this. I really am. I mean, if it were a spring or a stream or something, if it's Great House Springs, we all grew up around here, and Great House Springs, you used to go out there and get your water. You had good water. You probably still can get it, but the cows will probably run you off.
The picture's up on the monitor now.
What? That's my house right there on the corner. I take care of it. I mow behind it. I mow all the way to the curb. And you're within 50 feet, and you're in my back door. And the little picture there will show you that. I'm not going for this. I'm going to be resurrecting again some dead bodies in my backyard, so y'all come on out.
I think that's allowed.
Because if I want to build a pool, I'll build a pool. If I want to build a deck, I'll build a deck. But I don't I mean, it's all flat, so I don't have to, except where that drops off. But I mow and weed eat that entire thing every week in the summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Now, this other gentleman spoke about the same area, right?
Yeah.
And this is not a drainage ditch, a concrete, I mean, this is the picture of it. That is a creek.
That's what they put in.
Well, I'm asking staff, Gracie.
Right, the threshold that was used is if 100 acres is draining into that waterway. And so that means that over 100 acres is draining into that waterway.
But it's buffered with the concrete, so the concrete won't, and as you said, it wouldn't be done that way probably now, but it's done that way. And I guess I'm having a hard time understanding why this ordinance would pertain to that, because you've got a concrete swale, so you're not dealing with erosion.
You're dealing with the filtration issue because that waterway is draining into Clabber Creek. And so when the threshold that we used and applied across the city consistently is when you have 100 acres draining into the waterway, that's the point at which the buffer is applied. And even though it is concrete, you're still going to get the filtration benefits that you would in any other waterway. It's part of the entire system.
Actually, if they planted trees along there, it would probably cause problems with the concrete structure, wouldn't it? The concrete. It would break it up, the roots would eventually.
Well, and in the ordinance itself, right, it's not telling property owners to change anything they're doing, but it would encourage letting the grass grow a bit higher so you are getting some of those filtration benefits.
Okay.
And we do have the retention pond at the end.
Hang on, folks. Hang on.
I apologize.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Brittany, do you want to ask?
No, that answered the
Gracie,
question,
anything?
unless,
If you do, we need to have her come back to the microphone.
well, I'm asking staff.
Okay, that's
Not,
good.
I'm asking staff about the detention pond. That's detaining water from the area I'm looking at down, then it runs down the other way to Owl Creek, right?
Clabber Creek.
Clabber Creek.
Right, and I wanted to make a note of that because the detention pond was mentioned earlier, and our detention ponds today, most of them are not currently designed to filter out sediment, pollutants of any kind. They're simply holding the water for 24 hours before releasing them into the waterway.
But the question is, it runs from that detention pond back? Or is the detention pond the end of this? I mean, if the detention pond is the end of this, then
The water flow is running, Jeremy Pate, Development Services, the water flow is running south, so it runs, if you'll follow here, the actual 100-acre point on your map that's included in your packet starts right about here where the icon is. That's where 100 acres we calculated drains into that point. So it runs south here in a natural drainage channel, goes underneath Crystal Drive into a constructed concrete channel that was constructed in the last 4 or 5 years. It goes into a detention facility here, which then has a drainage outlet structure that drains into Clabber Creek, which you can see. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see basically how Clabber Creek flows then back to the west. So Clabber Creek is this area here.
this picture is showing a concrete detention, but now as a detention pond, that means it's just slowing it down and it's running on out of it? Is what you're saying?
Detention facilities are currently designed not necessarily for water quality control, but water quantity. So
it's
what
not
it does,
a retention, it's a
right. It catches the water during a major storm event, holds it, and at the end of that detention pond, it has a structure that only allows a certain volume of water to be released during a period of time, so that downstream properties aren't flooded by new development. So that's been a requirement on the books for several years now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Sarah?
She got it spot on. I was just going to add that those kind of concrete ditches, one, are what we want to try to avoid, and two, if we can ameliorate them by improving the amount of vegetation on either side of them, because water is running in from lateral areas from the sides. Yes, most of it is coming from the channel, but water does, that's why they're sloped like that. The houses are higher than that area. So the more you can get the plants to take up those pollutants and use them, rather than having them go straight into, and especially in the first flush, in that first inch of rain, it's, especially in these kinds of areas, you have chemical contamination, the level of sewage at times. So if you can plant vegetation along there, even if it is grass, that really helps minimize the impacts of these kinds of conventional drainage systems. And so that's why it's important to include these types of areas within this ordinance so that we can begin to mitigate some of that.
Okay, Brenda, you had another question?
Karen,
Right, I was also going to clarify that in the ordinance itself, it talks about pipe streams, and what it says specifically is when reviewing any development, grading, or building permit application, the city engineer may determine that normal streamside protection regulations shall not be applicable to that portion of a stream that has been piped or enclosed within a culvert or similar conduit prior to the adoption of this ordinance. So I think it is accounting that there may be circumstances that might be different if you were in that conduit, but it's not exempting them because we do believe there are filtration benefits. It just may be in a different form than a natural waterway that is not in an enclosed conduit.
so these kind of situations will be looked at a little differently for variances and so forth, you're saying?
But there is a statement in here that allows the city engineer to take that into consideration for development, grading, or a building permit.
Okay.
And I'd just like to say that you raised a good question. I was very concerned about this and met with them today, went out there today at lunch and looked at it, and I do think that it is a very, and Karen, I've emailed you about this situation too, and it does seem odd to me too that this would be, it is the one thing that has bothered me probably the most as I've looked at property and had concerns for citizens, so yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
It's kind of unique, so anyway.
Okay. Tim.
I gotta apologize first. I'm all dry. This has to do with drugs. Be thankful I take those drugs. My name is Jim. I'm from West Fayetteville. I live about 3 house distances from a creek, and I just figured out last night because of the Ward 4 meeting, it's going to affect a lot of my people, and I didn't have time to talk to them. And by the way, Mayor, I know how to make a good bed. I think, you know, somebody ought to go and make her a bed if the city's in their house. So, I'm kidding. Okay. A lot of they say ignorance is bliss. And we had some people up here who just felt like this was the right thing to do. And there are people up here who are just, some of them are dedicated, hardworking people who do this kind of work and learn about it. I just wonder, where is the dedication to man, to our Constitution, to our forefathers and what they thought? Yeah, there wasn't a breakdown until FDR came in, and you know, he was the first one who said progressive, believe it or not. So I cut out a lot of vitriolic stuff, but it will be a little bit long. As far as the seat belts go, I didn't obey the law. I didn't listen to the service announcements. I didn't pay any attention. It was my 6-year-old daughter who says, "Daddy, why don't you put on your seat belt?" Cooperative. I put it on. I realized I'd been had, and it was the right thing to do. I've been wearing my seat belt ever since. So you don't have to just sit around and open everybody's car as they drive by and see if they're wearing their seat belts. As far as that, seeing a herring, I saw a herring while riding my bike. Yes, I'm a radical conservative who rides bikes. That herring was surrounded by bike trails that weaved in and out behind Walmart. Okay? He seemed to be doing okay with 24 feet of runoff coming at him. And he's just standing in the pond watching us ride by like a bunch of fools. Now, I don't mean this lightly. A lot of people in here don't know what they're dealing with. I don't know how many people on the council know what they're dealing with. You would be surprised where all this stuff comes from. And I'm telling you, it wasn't from your founding fathers. You know, Washington didn't say, you know, let's free them from Georgia and then take their land. Yeah, it's just not the way it was done. But the people here don't know, even the people on my side, most of them don't know where all this stuff starts. There's only one person I know who's an expert on this panel that can tell you all about it. Maybe the rest of you just don't know. And folks, I'm not blowing wind up your skirt. And I'm not the first one to ever say it. On the education thing, I received no invite to do any of this stuff. Now I get the monthly schedule, but my teacher wasn't so good, so I don't read all the literature on the bottom. I'm a slow reader, admittedly, so which confuses the fast brain. But you know, nobody told me about it, and I believe before this all came up, when I went to the Ward 4 meetings, people knew that I wasn't completely against moderation. I'm a social moderate, I'm a fiscal conservative, and I believe in the Constitution first. That's pretty much who I am. And I'll work with just about anybody, except for somebody who's harassing me. I had a chance to call Lindsay. He was on the list. I was one of the callers on. And I called Lindsay's office. And they gave me to a gentleman who was actually reviewing it at the minute I was talking to him. They have a building that's going in, and now they're concerned. They're in the middle of a construction start, and all these plans have been made. And I don't know too many people who have given more back to this community than that hard-nosed football player. Now, I don't agree with the man a lot, and I think there's a lot of show, but that man has given a heck of a lot back to the city. Not to mention apartments which stack people, which is infilling. And that's a good thing, according to this council. So you're even bothering one of the guys who I guess he makes this community better by giving people decent places to live. and in all categories. I have a lot more to say, and I tell you, I X'd out a lot of vitriolic stuff, but I'll just go ahead and end it. Because I really think the vote is in, and it was in a couple meetings ago. And if it doesn't apply to you, you know, please don't take it as an offense. But we've had people on TV, or not on TV, in front of the press, you know, saying it's a done deal. Check the press if you doubt me. I just think the far to left progressives and the extremist right cause problems in this country. A lot of you think that, you know, I'm not here to harm you. Or maybe the jerk down the street is out to harm you. Well, go do something about the jerk. I'm sure you have ordinances somewhere where you can scare the heck out of them. You know, break down his still and send them packing. But that's an extremist left thing, is to come in, race in and say, you will, you will, you will. How many of your kids responded to that? I guarantee you when you walk out of the room, they were probably either laughing at you or they grew up to do that exact same thing. You know, you just can't go around beating people up. And a lot of people feel it is that way. I'm afraid for these people, but I'm also afraid for what's going to happen to me, because I'm an aggressive person. You know, I was a warrior supposed to defend the Constitution. If somebody comes and starts telling me, you know, the 2 trees I put in were wrong, I don't know how I'm going to react. And I think it's fair, because I was trained to be that way. Your government trained me that way. So, you know, and I would ask that one of my ward representatives change your mind, because there's too much division in this. And at least, you know, do it to represent the honesty that we're evenly divided here.
Thank you, Jim.
I'm Gladys Tiffany, and I live on Spout Spring Branch, so I'm one of the affected homeowners. One thing that was said at the last city council meeting that deeply affected me was when staff mentioned that 70% of the pollution that had been found in the watershed came from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I mean, I know this is a very special place, and I don't want it to be special because it's the master of the pollution source. I really think that as a community, we have to be willing to allow ourselves to make the kind of sacrifices that we can make a decision based on what is good for the health of the community, rather than saying, well, I only have a little pollution, so my part should not count. I really think that it takes all of us to actually do this together, and it will take regulation in order for that to actually happen, because no one of us can be in control of all of it. And if just 50 feet is going to make the difference between reducing that 70% of the pollution that's coming from my special city, I want to see that pollution level go down, and I would like to see this resolution passed.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay. Who's next, folks? Please key up if you want to talk. Sorry.
Do we need to take a break while council members are
I think
absent?
everybody's wearing out here.
I know, but it's fruitless for us to talk if the council's half missing.
Okay.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council and the mayor. So nice of you to let us speak tonight, and we thank you, I think I say for everyone, for taking your time and spending your thought process on making this a better city. As you know, my name is Cynthia Hasseloff. I am the steward at May Farm. We are an organic farm and agritourism destination at 4618 North College. We have 301.41 feet of streamside lake on Clear Creek. That's 15,070 square feet under the proposed 50-foot buffer. According to your contract assessor who visited our farm last Wednesday, the value of that 15,070 square feet is approximately $155,673.10. I am definitely an interested party. In fact, not just in theory. And I think you know from last week that I love my land. And I love being a steward of my land. I'm not used to this ordeal by democracy, so I tend to flag in the 4th and 5th hour, so forgive me if I wear down. At the last meeting, we were enjoying a wonderful exercise in democracy. And as we got towards the end of the session, we were drifting past zealotry on both sides, and I believe towards reason and education. Then a citizen came up and took the citizen's podium and said, "Education is a crock." I was jolted from my stupor just in time to see some of you nodding in agreement, in enthusiastic agreement with that person. As an attorney, I know that when the judge is doing fist bumps and high fives with the prosecutor, my client's outlook is not too good. I know Dr. Lewis has said that she has focused her life's work on educating others about protecting natural resources. And we would certainly like for her to come out the farm and help us on a seminar day to teach people about natural resources. But her activism doesn't give us horrible, self-interested, ignorant old property owners much confidence in the future of this decision. Nonetheless, I want on principle to address the issue of education. I do not believe that education is a crock. If education is a crock, the city's recycling program, which has gone from 0 compliance to 60% compliance, is a crock. If education is a crock, a lot of us have wasted large parts of our lives becoming educated and teaching others. If education is a crock, we can significantly reduce the national deficit by eliminating education. If education is a crock, that illustrious institution on the hill, which gives this community much of its identity, is a crock. When compulsion and force become the first answer and supplant education, then another American illusion falls like a house of cards. In a recent Sunday column, a correspondent said that education is a luxury of time. Education is too slow. There is no compulsion, there is no force in education. We want this ordinance now, now, now. The last time I had that much pressure to act now, don't wait, do it, don't think, do it now, do it, do it, do it, I bought a health club membership in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I hope you all can stand up to pressure better than I can. Ms. Minkle, and listen, the staff in this city is extraordinary. We deal with them on a regular basis and have enjoyed our meetings. So Ms. Minkle tells the press, and she says it a lot, that the ordinance won't affect current property owners. And we've heard that several times tonight. If that's true, why are we rushing to do this? The demise and turnover of the current property owners could take years. I'm personally planning to live another 50 years. So is that a luxury of time? Ms. Minkle has also told the press that the proposed ordinance will only affect future buyers. That doesn't sound very good for people who want to sell their property when their property values are already down and the home sales are the lowest in 37 or 35 years.
Please don't bring the staff into it. Address your comments to me, please.
Okay, I will not do that. Can I address the board?
You may.
Yes, okay. Staff, I compliment you on your fine work. Okay.
Thank you.
Anyhow, this will be hard for property owners. It's also, but we all know, and I think we've heard it rumored here and there, that this is really designed for those nasty old developers that we all hate anyway. I mean, I hate them too. But you know, Fayetteville has developers coming and going with their ordinances. You ever hear a developer after he leaves this meeting? And now many of these developers are going north with their jobs. They're taking their local employees, their tax dollars, and their community involvement. They're not only sucking the money with them, but the culture, the prestige, and the quality of life of this community. I don't think Fayetteville wants to become one of those towns the railroad bypassed, that's withered away, with empty, faded storefronts and streets full of blowing debris. Well, of course not. There is a balance, and that balance means real quality of life for all of us. Renters, property owners, whatever that proportion is. We've spent a lot of time on this ordinance at our house, and I'm sure in other houses that's gone on. And we've been asked over and over, what's wrong with this ordinance? What's wrong with this ordinance is its very existence. You can read it any way you want after listening to this group tonight. You can read it any way you want. You can grandfather something in, or you can grandfather something out, whatever you want. You can make a variance or not. You can decide case by case. Case by case is going to take a lot of time, folks. Ultimately, I think this ordinance will make scofflaws of every good citizen and every homeowner who wants to take care of their yard. And I think some of those landowners are going to say, $250 fine a day, just take that off what you owe me for my land. This ordinance gives new meaning to being deep in the weeds or woody vegetation. I kind of wanted to get on my soapbox, but I'm going to spare you that. I am a little concerned as I look about this wonderful room and see the different sides that are presented, that here and there is contempt for the very basic document that we founded this country on. I am embarrassed that men and women, free men and women, property owners, taxpayers, and all those other good things, must be like school children and raise their hand and say, can I go to the bathroom? Can I mow my yard? Can I plant a tree? Can I take out a tree? That doesn't seem right to me. But I think as leaders of this community, you have heard many well-reasoned and well-presented arguments from both sides and the middle. Surely there is enough that you have heard this evening and in the 2 other evenings to persuade you to slow down. Try the least coercive, the least punitive, and the least invasive solution first. Let's try that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time.
Hang on, I think there's a question. Sarah, you have a question?
Yeah, a couple of things. Apparently, as I understand that you were saying that you were worried about the property value of your land, and I'm
not worried about my property because I don't intend to sell it.
Well, okay, so you mentioned in the paper there was something about that you had talked about the property value of your land.
I did tonight.
Yeah. Couple things related to that. And looking at a map of the property and
oh, there's my place.
Yeah. And this is something that can come up, that may come up frequently depending on where FEMA determines this. But on this specific property, it looks like, according to the image, that the 50 feet that would take into account these types of activities are already within the floodway and also the floodplain.
That's correct.
So, which means that the property value wouldn't be affected by this because it's already a part of your existing property. And that's part. I think that's important to consider. And this ordinance, what it does is it brings it to the city level to help city staff have a framework for addressing this. So if you were to want to do something to that area, this would give a guidance in how to do that, and also the staff could guide you in the other realm of floodways and floodplains. So I don't agree that there would be an effect on property value when the property it's already designated by floodway and floodplain in this particular case because of the location near Clear Creek.
I don't expect the value of that property to be an issue. I'm stating that for other owners that have property of value. This property is in the floodplain, and we were told by an undisclosed staff member last week that, yeah, it's in the floodway, but the purpose of the flood ordinance is not the same as your streamside protection ordinance. Well, if the effect is the same, why are we making a double dip here?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah,
I can respond.
Well, to that point, the effect is not the same. I think up until the question and the discussion which just took place relevant to Councilmember Lewis's question, the response was economic. And this isn't about just the money. This is also about the pollution that enters the stream and the effect that that has on other systems that we rely upon, such as filtering our water. So the effect of the intent of the floodway protection is to protect homeowners from making investments which are going to be washed away.
But it controls that area, doesn't it?
There's not,
doesn't it control
the intent of the streamside protection ordinance is not that. It is to protect our water quality, and that is very much a different thing.
Okay. I believe the flood ordinance says that you can't do certain things in that area, which is pretty much the same that your ordinance says can't be done. Whether it says its purpose is to be a streamside ordinance or to protect property owners, it has a buffer area that's protected, that already is soaking up water and runoff and releasing it slowly into the stream. I planted, someone asked earlier if any of these nasty old owners were attending courses and doing anything about the riparian program. Well, a couple of years ago, we started with John Pennington and the university and began attending workshops and seminars. We built rain barrels, and we put out 65 trees last year. I have 7 little pecan trees planted in my riparian area. And if the woody vegetation threatens them, I am going to favor the little pecan trees. So, any more questions?
Well, I'd just like to say there's nothing in this ordinance that would prevent you from doing that.
Well, you see, I guess my issue, Mr. Petty, is that I don't want to have to ask you when I blow my nose. And if I want to go out in my backyard in my pajamas, I want to go. Now that, see, Mayor thinks that's ugly and I'm being something bad. But honestly, I don't like to see a woman in her 60s or 70s come up here and ask you if she can remove her stumps. That's pitiful.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on, folks. Who's next?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Adjust the microphone here. Good evening. John Pennington, Washington County Cooperative Extension Service for part of the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture. And I have information that I think would be helpful for you, at least in your decision-making process for how you move forward. I have been working to educate streamside landowners to the best of my ability for the past year and a half within Clear Creek. There are approximately 1,800 streamside landowners in Clear Creek, which encompasses 5 municipalities: Taneytown, Johnson, Washington County, Fayetteville, and Springdale. With my interactions with these streamside landowners, I've found that very many of them are wanting to know more about what they can do to improve water quality, to the tune of nearly 40%. 40% is a really good number in terms of having people do things voluntarily, to come to a program, to implement a best management practice. For me, though, you know, I still want to see more, and I want to hear from more people, and I want more people to do more things that are good for water quality. And you know, I think we're getting there, moving forward. Obviously, there are some people, though, that will resist almost any kind of a change in a behavior or a management activity because they've done something their whole life or they're used to it. And I just want you to know that in no way at all can I relate to that. What I'm meaning is, you know, I do things a certain way, and sometimes I don't like to change them either. But I do believe that the educational process and giving this information to people can be helpful, but maybe not something that you can totally rely on. And so as you move forward in developing your ordinance, you know, if you were to make any kind of changes to it from what it is right now, you know, I still think that there is a range of possibilities for the people that are opposing it and for the people that are supporting it, to find common ground. And, you know, maybe finding some common ground to where water quality can be protected. Some of the problems associated with residences being really close to the creek can be avoided, such as, you know, somebody's house not being flooded or somebody not investing money and having it be damaged due to flooding. Those are things that this ordinance would at least slow down, which would be beneficial for some people in terms of looking out for their well-being, but albeit not everybody wants their well-being looked out for. So I've always thought, in working with the education and outreach component with these streamside landowners, collecting input for the development of this ordinance by city staff to go before city council, that whether the ordinance was a good ordinance or it was a bad ordinance, whether it passed or whether it failed, that a lot of people would learn a lot of things in the meantime that would overall make some kind of good improvement on water quality. And I think that's happening, you know, because somebody doesn't like it, they're going home to look up and read whatever, you know, flood reduction or pollutant filtration or woody vegetation, you know, what do those things do? If they do support it, I'll bet you they've probably gone and looked to see what the other side is seeing as well, and seen that there is some, you know, maybe kindred feeling for those that do have their property that would be affected by this, and they can feel for them in some way that they would be taking a burden on themselves. And so I really think that these two groups have more in common than what it may seem like tonight. And then I would just encourage you all, as being one of my streamside landowners, which by the way has implemented several best management practices, number one being a no-mow zone along the trails, very cost-saving activity in terms of gas and manpower, as well as helping the bank stay stable, making the trail not fall into the creek maybe as quick as it would if there was not healthy vegetation, and then also water quality and wildlife habitat. So those functions are there, and the city has voluntarily made changes. And I would just like to thank you for being one of my streamside landowners that has voluntarily implemented best management practices to improve water quality. And as you go forward and you make this decision, I just hope that you do it in a way in which you feel like at the end of the day that you're accomplishing the goal that you may be after, which would be the water quality improvements, but that you would not impact people's livelihoods in a way that may not be, you know, good for them. And that is a tough decision that you all have to make, and I'm so glad that I don't have to sit up there and make it. But thank you all for your time and listening to the comment of both people on each side. I think that's very worthy of you all and very commendable. And with that, I just wanted to share some information that I have learned that I thought might be of somewhat use for you as you go forward with your ordinance development process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Now, who's next?
How are you doing, Council? Good evening. My name is Bill Harris. I've been a registered voter in Fayetteville for about 5 years, a little over. I live just off Archibald Yell, and I'm not a property owner. But I do appreciate the way of life we have here in northwest Arkansas. Of course, this used to be a rural area, and it's rapidly proceeding toward a urbanized and metropolitan area that gives us some growing pains, and that's what we're suffering tonight. I wonder if I may pose this question. Given that all of our government agencies are there to serve the public, how difficult would it be to offer these property owners a property tax exemption for that portion of the property affected by this ordinance?
Well, I don't know. I have an answer for you. I don't know. What do you?
The answer would probably be extremely difficult because the county is the one, the county assessor is the one that assesses property. And she has to follow state laws, which are very restrictive on what property is exempt and what is not.
Yes.
For example, this building would be exempt because it's used totally 100% for government purposes. And yet somebody's backyard that is subject to various different requirements by the city, like a setback requirements, you can't build too close to your neighbor or you can't build too close to the creek, is not city property at all, and therefore I don't think the assessor would agree to exempt that property from the property taxes.
All right, that's a pretty fair answer, and I take it you're the attorney. Is that correct?
Yes.
That'd be his job.
Yes, he is. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I understand that the Christian common law, or English common law, whatever it is, assigns 21 rights to the ownership of property, such as mining minerals and growing crops and living there and feeding cattle and all that stuff. Certainly, some of these rights will be lost in the area affected by this ordinance for those property owners. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
Well, we of course follow American law.
Yes.
And even though that is based originally on English common law, that's not necessarily what we follow, especially for property law. Each state is somewhat different, but it's true that a property owner has many different rights to his property, but he's also subject to reasonable regulations by the government in all areas of government, the state, local, as well as the federal government to some extent.
Yes. Now, as we go through these growing pains, trying to give you orderly thought here, we do suffer some constriction as we live closer and closer together. We suffer some restriction, regulation. Hopefully we never suffer regimentation. But we do have to adjust to a more crowded environment, and everyone should know that. On the other hand, there's an offsetting value. Your farmland, your pasture land, can be sold off as housing developments. Your property values increase. So our way of life, there is justice in the world. And there is fairness in the economy, okay? Well, I'll take that back. But things do work out. Now, to rephrase the question, the original question, how difficult will it be for this public agency to work with some other public agency, such as the county or even the state, to effect such an offer of property value, property tax exemption for the property owners? Is it even possible?
Well, certainly I would say anything is possible, but I would also say that the school district, who is the chief beneficiary of property taxes, wants to defend those property taxes because they need those property taxes to educate our children. And so I think that, and we also have a constitutional amendment to require a certain amount of millage for the school district. So I think it would be very difficult to get that particular exemption put into the law. I think that would be a very difficult burden. I can never say it's impossible.
Okay. And the final statement, thank you for your time. Typically, if people want to feel good together about things, there has to be a little quid pro quo, is that how it goes? A fair exchange. When we take something from someone, even if for a good reason, when we have to, we should offer something in return. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay.
Mayor, Council, my name is Greg Howe. I reside on Rockwood Trail on Mount Sequoia. For those on the council who I have not met yet, I am also the city's urban forester, but I'm here as a citizen today. And I want to talk a little bit about green infrastructure. And I've got a little demo, if you'll bear with me for just a moment, that I'd like to go through, because I hear us talk about property rights, I hear us talk about erosion on stream banks, and many other different parts of this argument. And I think we've sort of started to lose sight of why we're doing this. And so I'd like to kind of bring us back a little bit. And what I would like you to do is use your imagination with me for just a little while. And since I'm talking about green infrastructure, I brought a green apple. And I'd like you to just think about this as all the water that we have on the planet Earth. This apple, for this time period, represents all the water on the planet Earth. When we cut that apple up, we cut it up into quarters. We take 3 of those quarters, we have to set those aside as seawater. That's unusable to us unless we want to spend an awful lot of energy and money in reverse osmosis to drink, have for industrial use, and everything like that. We've got another half of a quarter that's tied up in the Arctic and the Arctic Circle and the poles, and it's unavailable to us until it starts to melt. And then it goes into seawater, so we really don't have it available to us. What we have left is a quarter of that, and half of that is tied up in underground water use in the plate tectonics and different things like that, where it's steam and pieces where it's not available to be drilled out, you can't get to it, you can't use it. It is fresh water, but it is not usable to us. And what we have left is this small piece that represents about 3% of the entire apple. This is the fresh water that is available. We have to break this and take 2/3 of that and break it off and say that this is deep enough underground that while we have the technology to extract it, it is very expensive to do so. So that leaves us with 1% of the water fresh water on this planet in lakes, rivers, underground aquifers that are easy to get to. And this water is available to all 6.7 billion of us, all the plants that are on this planet, all of the animals that are on this planet. We're sharing this 1%. And this water quality of this 1% is very important. And the streamside ordinance is one part of a spoke of things that we can all do to help protect that water quality. And so I am in favor of this, and I wish to have you remember that this is about water quality and that we're protecting our drinking water source. And I would like to just finish with a couple of comments about some things that have been said tonight. We've had some things talk about property rights and about phosphorus and so forth. I'm probably the only one in this room that's actually enforced a buffer ordinance before. In a prior life, many of you know I'm from Florida. I've been here for about 3 years and enjoyed the time that I've been here and the great opportunities that I've had here. And while I was in Florida and was enforcing one of these ordinances, it was part of my job to go out and review homeowners' homes for variances for sunrooms, room additions, garage additions, boardwalks from their house out to a dock, put the dock in, put a pool in. And these things can be done. They're looked at on a case-by-case basis. It depends a lot on how the property's shaped, how close they are, and those variances do get approved. People don't go wanting. They may have to compromise. We had one person up here earlier who said that they wanted to build something. They had a great idea, but then they came in for review and found out that they might have to change it a little bit, but they still got something great, and they enjoy it. And that's the same thing. You know, somebody may come in and want a pool, and they may want a pool that's 60 feet long and 25 feet wide or 30 feet wide or something like that. They might have to reduce that a little bit in order to get that pool built. But they're still going to have something that will be functional, be usable. We're not going to, you know, I don't think the intent is to keep somebody from truly having something and having the value of their property. One of the other things that's good about having this buffer is we're just not talking about phosphorus. We're talking about nitrogen. And nitrogen is one of the biggest things that increases algae in waterways and pollutes that water and kills off the plant life and the wildlife that's in those. So by having this buffer to help absorb that nitrogen before it runs off into the creeks is very, very important. And I say that because the reason that I had that ordinance to enforce when I was working for Hillsborough County in Florida is because the EPA came in and mandated that the Tampa Bay estuary be cleaned up. You have an opportunity here as the local government to decide how to keep your water clean. Don't wait until it gets dirty and the EPA wants to come in and tell you how to do it. You will lose control. And then not only will this governing body or the governing bodies that come after it and the citizens that are affected by this will probably have a lot worse things to deal with. I think it would be better and more proactive to adopt this legislation now and to have it in place and to keep our waters clean so we're not dealing with some kind of EPA regulations at some other date. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, who's next? You might want to pass those apples out to the council.
That's right.
I'm sorry, you go ahead.
I'm Shelley Boniuto. I live on Clear Creek. And someone said earlier that when you take something, you have to give something back. And I feel like we can't imagine that we can come into an ecosystem and build our houses and block off this ecosystem and build our roads and frack and create all of these buildings on an ecosystem and not have some bad effect. We have to give something back. Our quality of life is totally dependent on our water. When we moved to Clear Creek, I said, I'll do everything I can to protect you. We play in this water with our grandchildren, and we planted a little organic garden up from it a little ways. but it floods 3 times a year in this 100-year floodplain. So there's really nothing we can do with that area anyway except love it and protect it and enjoy it. We did build a studio up near our house, and we did want a bathroom in that studio, but that would have required a septic tank. Well, that's a no-brainer. When you live on a creek, you don't put a septic tank near there. Please pass this ordinance. I'm very grateful that there is some kind of broad understanding of what real quality of life means, and it means protecting our resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. Who's next? Good evening, Felicia.
Hi, my name is Felicia Ferris. I'm a resident of 2215 Haskell Heights on Markham Hill. I'm not a property owner affected by this. I probably just fall short. I have a couple of good-sized streams on my property, about 20 acres on top of that beautiful hill. And it slopes out west toward 540. I'm disturbed by what I feel is an intrusion on people's personal property rights. Certainly, I wouldn't want to feel like I had limited use. And I don't think that many of the people that own property feel like a lot is going to be taken from them. It's all the premise and the thoughts and the feelings. Certainly any of the developments with and without this ordinance would come before the Planning Commission, and anything that could be discussed and tinkered with and be changed could and would and possibly could be redone next to these streams, and people could find out differently how to redo it. I think it's just the thought of it. Just as if how when you did chores when you were a kid with your parents, you didn't do it with the utmost enthusiasm. You didn't rake the leaves in the corners of the yard near the fence as well as you did when you owned your own property. You certainly didn't dust for your mom as well as you did when you owned your own home. You take pride in your property when you own it. But once that 25, 50 feet next to the stream starts to feel like it belongs to the city, people aren't going to keep it the same. They're not going to feel it belongs to them like it did before. They're not going to enjoy it with the same kind of enthusiasm. You can hear the tone of animosity and contentiousness about the people feeling like it's not going to be theirs. I've talked to a few people, and the idea of education, possibly maybe with 4 hours, 2 or 3 times over a 2-year period of time for best practice management. Do that for a 4-year period of time. See how that works. I don't agree with Dr. Lewis's idea that
keep your comments to me, please.
I'm just talking about her. It's just natural to look at somebody in thought. I'm sorry. I don't agree with her thought process that because we have so many renters that we have to do it without education and have to do it with financial penalty. One, because if someone is renting, you're going to have so much turnover. The property owner would need to educate each of their renters as they come in that they just can't weed eat or mow down to the bare surface. The property owner would need to let the person know, who are usually the ones that take care of the land in that area, how it's best needs to be managed, and not just slapping them with a $250 fine on each time it's not taken care of in an appropriate manner. The other thing with education, and it brings, as Mr. Pennington was describing, and he's a wonderful person to work with, in one, just meeting him, and 2, reading his literature on the internet, and seeing some of his brochures. That it brings together a group of people all stuck in the same hole or bankside that can all be collaborative in their efforts in fixing their problems. In closing, I would like to challenge you in thought to be brave in this issue, and that think if we're just chasing putting another green plaque on the wall, chasing just trying to slap more credentials of making Fayetteville look like a and we're just about becoming a more green community, and think about the property owners here, and maybe not vote on this final reading tonight, and maybe regroup with the property owners and the planning commission and people on the previous board, and maybe work toward a solution of education for the property owners. And it worked for Bella Vista. They cleared up all of those lakes. I think the property owners would manage with the knowledge their stream side much better instead of making it an antagonistic situation, and then reevaluate maybe in a 3 or 4 year period of time. Let's not snowball in just making this an ordinance where we just slap the handcuffs on the situation. Let's work where we can have a property owner, city work together instead of an antagonistic, confrontational situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Shoffett. I came here with my family in 1964 and moved back here to raise my family in '79. So I've been here a long time, and I support this ordinance because I think it's minimal. And I remember when the creeks were very polluted because there weren't a lot of rules. And the people that had the factories and the money did what they wanted, and the people didn't feel like they really had a lot of rights and didn't speak up because they might lose their job. And things have changed a lot. We've cleaned our streams up a lot over the years, and people move here because of the streams and the trees and you know, the quality of life that we have. And I think this is a minimal ordinance. And I thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Okay. Come on.
Good evening. Joe Maynard, property owner, Fayetteville resident. Lest I be perceived as negative, I would like to first start out by saying that the city staff that I've encountered is charged with putting into place the decisions that are made here. And I have not found one of the staff members I've encountered to not be very willing to work with everything that I've ever had to work with. Jesse in engineering, Jeremy, Dave, worked with Kit some, worked with Brenda on some issues. Great job. I really like the way the city works. I do have some questions that I'd like to get on the record for future use, and a couple of comments. I think I might have heard earlier, but this notice was just mailed directly from the city to the property owners. There was not a certified mail.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Mayor, can you tell me how the sewer plant's permitted approval, phosphorus levels, EPA relationship has anything to do with the origin or genesis of this particular ordinance, and how those two things are related, if at all?
Dave, I can get you an answer pretty quick here.
Hey, Dave.
The genesis for this ordinance relating to the wastewater treatment permits is that in 2004 and 2005, when the permit was up for review for renewal at ADEQ and EPA for the Nolan wastewater treatment plant, the Beaver Water District had addressed some issues, as they always do with those type permits with ADEQ. That evolved to the point where there was the agreement between the Beaver Water District and the city of Fayetteville, whereby we agreed to meet certain standards relating to phosphorus and nutrients in the White River Basin, and they agreed also to withdraw their objection and their request, which would have caused us to have a much lower phosphorus limit in our wastewater discharge permit. this ordinance was an offshoot of that agreement, whereby we did a nutrient reduction plan study that identified a whole number, or many diverse actions that can be taken to reduce nutrients within the watershed. This was one of those actions. I think somebody earlier said one of many spokes in the wheel, which I thought was a great way to put it, because it is one tool of many to reduce the nutrients, phosphorus, nitrogen, and other pollutants in the watershed. That's the evolution of how this came about. Did that answer the question? Sure did. Okay.
Can I ask?
Yes, sir.
And David, you can clarify, but the nutrient management plan, management plan is just a plan, and it suggested that the city explore a riparian-zone ordinance. Now, the actual language wasn't developed for this until there was a mayoral change, and in that mayoral change there was a suggestion to have an economic development summit called the Fayetteville Forward Summit, and out of that a group of citizens came forward called the Green Infrastructure Group, and they requested that come to life, that the staff put time towards that, and then the council prioritized a whole bunch of stuff out of the Fayetteville Forward Summit, and this riparian zone ordinance, which was what it was referred to at the time, was one of those things that the staff was then said, okay, we'll put time towards that. And so the nutrient management plan was a suggestion of this being explored. It didn't come to life until citizens participated in that summit and brought it and moved it forward.
That's correct.
Question. I guess I got a couple of questions. Number one, I've heard three different answers. And geosyntax is what I want to go back to and see. One of the things they were charged with was how this came about, wasn't it? From the agreement with the Beaver Water District. I can read, it says, yes, go ahead. I'm going to read this name.
They were charged with developing a plan to propose methods of reducing phosphorus in the White River. And one of the things that they presented was exploring a riparian zone ordinance.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I had read where they recommended exploring a riparian zone ordinance. So that really came about before the change of mayors.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean the green infrastructure, Fayetteville Forward Summit, the citizen involvement came later.
Yeah, this is a good time to bring this up. I've heard three different terms of why, of what we meant to achieve. I've heard, and I can read where it says, the purpose of this agreement with the Beaver Water District is to achieve a net reduction of the load of total phosphorus, TP, in the Beaver Lake. You go on and go on. David, you're quoted, TP, total phosphorus. Then I start hearing nitrogen. And then I start hearing nutrient reduction. Which prompted the agreement with the Beaver Water District. Let me just do one more thing. On March 27, 2006, the City Council approved a resolution, protection of the Beaver Lake watershed, approving an agreement with Beaver Water District to achieve a net reduction of the load of total phosphorus TP into Beaver Lake. Beaver Water District and the city have proposed a series of actions that will allow the city to maintain its current NPDES discharge limit of 1 mg/1 TP in exchange for the city conducting a program to reduce non-point source loadings of TP within the watershed. In essence, the agreement is based on the city and Beaver Water District's commitment to show reductions of TP from non-point sources sufficient to offset the increased loading from the treatment plant allowed by the more liberal NPDES permit. Is it, when we first started out, we're getting, as the pressure builds up one way, the relief valve goes to nitrogen. Is it phosphates? Is it nutrients? Which probably what y'all are going to say, because that takes everything in. But that's not what we heard, and that's not what was written in some of these official documents.
The very specific focus was the phosphorus limit within the NPDES permit. We also do have a nitrogen limit within the permit, but that was not the specific point of the agreement. It is certainly a portion of the benefit from the agreement, because nitrogen and phosphorus are both nutrients that affect. When we did the plan that geosyntax developed, it was the nutrient reduction plan. It did not simply address phosphorus, but it did address other nutrients as well. But the focus was phosphorus and the phosphorus limit within the wastewater discharge permit.
Coming back to the agreement with Beaver Water District, the nutrient reduction plan will evaluate sources of phosphorus within the Beaver Lake watershed in the city of Fayetteville, including both point and non-point sources. So it sounds to me like when the agreement with the Beaver Water District, which I hasten to add, after at the last meeting before last, when I talked to the man, Jim, I can't remember his last name, from Beaver Water District, he said that they really welcomed this this ordinance, and they liked it. And then the day after that, we got an email from what's the lady's name?
Colleen Gaston?
Who?
Possibly Colleen Gaston?
Yes, we got an email from Colleen Gaston that said this was not a Beaver Water District it was not a Beaver Water District ordinance. This is some of the stuff I was going to bring up later, but I found it as an opportune time. And if I can, Mayor, I'd like to ask one more question of Karen. Karen, during the last meeting, did you answer a question that one of the big things, because I may not have heard this right, did you say that nitrogen was one of the biggest things they were looking at as far as the reduction going into Beaver Lake watershed?
I don't remember if I talked about nitrogen. I might have if I was talking about the nutrient reduction plan. I think it's always been clear in the staff reports it was initiated because we were looking at phosphorus specifically. But when we were looking at studies, a lot of the studies look at all nutrients, and so we were looking at all nutrients.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, to me, it looked like it changed with the pressure, but I find it in 3 different places where it's anyway, go ahead.
Are you good, Rob?
I am for a few
well,
minutes. Yeah.
I mean, do you have any more questions, I guess?
Not this time.
Okay. Okay, well, back to Joe.
Can I talk now?
Yes, you may.
Sorry, you've already used up your 3 minutes.
Well, your time is up now, Joe, and
you guys just talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, you can talk to me, Mayor.
you stick around, we'll have breakfast together. Go ahead.
I'll tell you what, I got to go to bed first.
All right.
Okay, and I was going to ask how long the city had this particular plan on the agenda. I got the gist of it, and I don't even want to get started on that. The first public notice.
All right.
Does anybody know when the first public notice of the Screamside ordinance was out there? Not officially necessarily, but when was this all on the street?
It was last March of 2010. There were 2 public education and outreach sessions that were held by the city.
Okay, thank you. One of the concerns that I will have on this and other ordinances of this nature, I'm not necessarily concerned for myself on this, but what stops a future city engineer, a lesser man than Jesse, from trying to selectively enforce this? Or
you should probably know that Chris Brown is actually the city engineer.
or a city attorney, or a mayor that can use. We've got to be careful what we're creating for someone with motives other than ours to utilize in the future. So please consider that, and understand that the property owners here probably will have to apply their common sense and read the words at face value. I certainly don't enter into a contract myself by saying, well, here's what it means. I don't ask the person I'm entering a contract with what it means. I read it for what it means. And no matter what you tell me, if it says you can come eject me from my house, you say, oh, we'd never do that. That's what it says. So that's probably something that we really ought to look at the verbiage and see how many ways it can be interpreted by a reasonable man. That's a good word, isn't it, Kit? Reasonable? I've heard of it. Now, the point source issue. Let me get back to that one. Is there a possibility in any of your minds, especially the multiplicity of proponents of this ordinance on the board, is there a possibility in any of your minds that this will not be effective in any measurable way? Is that a remote possibility? That, you know, we did all this and we put this ordinance in and we made everybody put a filter all around their property and filtered everything through an approved filter for extreme, you know, illustration purposes. And then is there going to be a possibility that there will be no measurable effect? Same measurements we're using now to say it's a problem. By those measurable effects, is there a possibility that there will be no effect on the phosphorus level, the nutrient level, the nitrogen level, the dog poo level, whatever level? Is that a possibility in anybody's mind?
I can tell you that the Environmental Action Committee spent months researching and digging into existing scientific literature, existing city codes to base just the language on studies that had shown that this has an effect. And so we're going into this with what I say and what that group of citizens who worked very hard to do it on, and then the staff as well, identified studies as well as other cities who had used this, had tested it, and it has an effect. And therefore, when the city is building its plan for dealing with stormwater management and nutrients, it has been shown over and over that this is an effective one spoke in a wheel when you're dealing with your stormwater management in a city. And so, like most decisions, you have to do your research, you have to understand the system, you have to move forward with the most knowledge that you can. And I agree that you want to be looking at what were the effects of those other cities, what were the effects of those studies, and that group of people worked very hard to identify those. And we have the bibliography, I guess, to share if you would like to see that, but it is an extensive list.
Well, as I spoke in the previous meeting, that I did attempt to start reading some of the studies. And the first table I came across, that I'm more of a spreadsheet guy rather than a paragraph guy. So the first one I came across, I looked at it carefully. I had it with me last week, table 4, and any reasonable person looking at that says, there's something wrong with this. I mean, whoever's measuring, there's something staring right at you here that isn't right. So aside from the fact that I agree that the people worked hard, and that I suspect that they were probably leaning more towards the green environment way of thinking to begin with, is there a possibility in your minds that it will not be a measurable result in any time in the future? 1 in a million? None whatsoever? Is there going to be a consensus there? Think about that for a minute. If you would say that there's a possibility that there will be no measurable results, then let's make this thing for 4 years and then it goes away unless it's renewed, or renews every year until data supports it to renew it each year. That seems reasonable to me. A sunset, revisit it with facts, with empirical data. And let's use the same data we're using now, same stuff. That makes sense. Did I not hear last meeting the guy from Beaver Lake, I think you mentioned his name a minute ago, said it was the...
Mr. Morgan?
Yeah, didn't he say Beaver Lake was the best it's ever been, and it's one of the best in the country?
He's right there.
No?
Okay, let's not get into discussions.
Right.
If we're going to get somebody up here, let's bring him to the microphone.
Did you recall hearing about, don't we have a really good lake, and it's been on an improving trend? Is that what we understood? That's what I understood.
Mr. Morgan, would you like to address that since you're the one? Yeah. Let's bring him up.
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, please. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I'm Dr. Robert Morgan, Beaver Water District. I did not say last week that Beaver Lake was in the best condition it ever was. That was Bob Kosick that said that. What
I apologize.
I can say, we have data on Beaver Lake. It's collected by the USGS monthly. And we can look in Beaver Lake and we can do statistical analysis on it. And looking at time trends is hopeless. There's just too much variability in data because the biggest driver of any water quality parameter in Beaver is the rainfall. And our rainfall varies from, what, 26, 7 inches to 72 inches. So you get all that much difference in quality. Okay, but we can look at long periods of time. And we have looked at the period before the Nolan treatment plant was installed, the 10 years after it, and the 10 years after that. So 78 to 79 to 88, 89 to 98, 98 to 2000, whatever. And I think the statement was made that phosphorus was declining, and we can find that in the epilimnion, the upper level of the lake. Yes, in fact, there is a statistical improvement in phosphorus. And I think that what you see is you put in controls at Nolan treatment plant and there was an immediate reduction. It wasn't actually a statistically significant reduction though, until 10 years later, and then the farmers started putting in the best management practices through the Arkansas Natural Resource regulations that required it, and then we started seeing another significant decrease. So phosphorus is getting better, just like the management is expecting it to do. And it will continue to do that, you know, the more practices we put in place. Each of these spokes we put in that wheel is going to help. Another comment, though, was made about 76% reduction in algae, I think. And really, I don't know what the base number was for that. We can look again before the treatment plant and after. There was a significant reduction in algae. Since that time, the 10 years of the 2000s versus the 10 years of the 90s, there has actually been an increase in algae. So I cannot say that Beaver Lake is getting better continually. And I don't think anybody can say that and back it with solid science. I think we can look at it and we can say we have a very good lake. We have parts of our lake that are very good, and that is exactly why we need to be serious about implementing preservation practices right now. Thank you.
Bobby?
Question, Doctor. Would you say it was a natural phenomenon or occurrence in the upper end of the lake where the river spreads out to form the lake that it drops its load and you've got more sediment there?
You find when sediment enters the lake, it comes in with some velocity and some turbulence, and it enters the lake spreads out and slows down, so sediment starts dropping out. That's where the lake starts getting clearer. That's when not the nitrogen, but the nutrients in general have more opportunity to behave or to act right there where the water starts clearing up because you get sunshine. And then you get higher algae at that point. And then on down lake, after the algae have used up the nitrogen and the phosphorus, then you get really clear water.
Yeah, I was going to say, even if you ran everything through a strainer, you're still going to get your clean, where it enters the lake, you're still going to get your cleanest water probably in mid-lake, aren't you?
No, sir. You're going to get the cleanest water at the dam.
At the dam? That's where it's the deepest, I guess, isn't it?
Where it's deepest, where it's had the longest time to settle. Yeah. And if you think about those, we talk about coming in, the riverine section coming into the lake goes from about Goshen to about Hickory Creek. Okay, and it varies there by several miles depending on flow.
Yeah, the depth of the water is
it's getting deeper too.
Yeah, well, some places it's shallow, some it's deep.
Yeah. And then what we call the transition zone, where it goes from turbid stream-like to lake-like, goes from about Hickory Creek, plus or minus a few miles every year, to the Highway 12 bridge, plus or minus a few miles every year. Okay.
Matthew.
Doctor, I am more concerned with the rate at which the level of phosphorus is changing than I am with the actual level at this time. Would you tell us that the rate is such that the level is dropping fast enough that we can avoid additional costs for water treatment? Or is it not dropping so fast and we need to take actions like this?
You know, the thing on Beaver is we want to avoid degradation. If we can hold where we are now, we will not have additional treatment because of degraded water supply. We may have additional treatment because of new regulations. As far as is the level of phosphorus dropping fast enough, you know, I think we're looking at trying to hold it, keep it from trending back up, which it could do easily with development. And you also have to remember that most of the development we've seen in the last 10 years has been in the Illinois River watershed, not the Beaver Lake watershed. Very, very little actually has spread into our watershed so far, which is a blessing. But, you know, and there's other complicating factors that go with that too. So, you know, the phosphorus is a really big concern, but it's not the only concern we have.
So in not so many words, if the population increases substantially and everything else being equal, we will not be able to hold the lake where it is now.
If the population increases substantially in the watershed without management practices in place, you will see higher nutrient levels and reduced water quality.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, Joe, back to you. Sort of like a tag team deal. Go ahead.
Okay. On that subject, has there been a study since 2010, post-2010 studies? I mean, anything this year, in the recent 6 or 8 months that you're considering in your, do you have the latest and greatest information, or is the last information you have 2008 or 9?
I don't know. Have y'all got a staff?
I don't know that we've looked at any study that came out in 2011 because the bulk of this ordinance was developed in 2010. I do know that we looked at all the available literature at that time, so up to when the ordinance was drafted.
Mayor, I don't mean to push here, but is there any data from Beaver Lake's water quality from 2009 or 10 incorporated?
I think that'd be a question for...
Hang on.
Well, I'm not asking if it exists, I'm asking
Colleen,
if it
come
was...
on up. Just hang on.
Well, again.
Colleen, you gotta... Come on up here. Y'all might as well just hang around up here.
Yeah, they don't know. I do have in my notebook, I'm Colleen Gaston from Beaver Water District, the same graph that I had at the last meeting that showed the turbidity levels at the lake, and that data does go through January of 2011, and it shows that there is increasing frequency and intensity of the episodes we see of basically really dirty water. We got into this whole discussion. I wasn't very good at answering what turbidity is, but it's really dirty water. And those episodes are increasing in intensity and frequency. That data goes up through January of 2011, if that's what you're looking for. We're also seeing increases in total organic carbon. That data goes up through 2011 through to date, right, Bob? And that causes a problem when Mr. Perry asked, are we facing increased treatment? And Bob said, not for phosphorus, but we are currently in the process, as I mentioned last week, of designing new facilities to treat for disinfection byproducts, which are sort of, it's a long, complicated explanation, which I'm not very good at giving, but basically it's because there is increased pollution in the lake that's causing some issues that we are going to be facing more stringent regulations in 2012.
Okay, Mark.
I'm going to cut to the chase here. You all are professionals. You're looking at this. We're talking all this stuff. Bottom line is based on the evidence, as a scientist, you as a legal representative, we can expect that if we initiate this type of activity, that we would be protecting our water. And I'm putting you on the spot because I want to get to the bottom line.
Yes, I'll give you an unqualified yes. That the issue is we do say the water quality is good in the lake, but we need to maintain it. As this area continues to grow, without some measures being put in place, it's not going to be maintained at its current good level.
Thank you. I think that's just getting to the bottom line. We can talk numbers and goof around, but bottom line is, as professionals, you see that this is important. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't appreciate goofing around as what I'm doing up here. I don't appreciate that comment. The numbers are
It was not aimed at you, sir.
The numbers are subject to questioning, surely. And you know, some people don't agree that the debate is over on global warming either. Now, let me just close here with that. You know, I wish that one of you could have the open-mindedness, at least on the other side, to have seconded Mr. Farrell's motion, not emotion. That would have been a good gesture. Then we could have at least debated that. That didn't sound like a bad idea. That was the more representative thing to do, I think. But I would like to leave you with this question of how can you presume to micromanage a complex ecosystem with a lack of understanding of the numbers if you struggle with a yes or no on the amendments? I mean, this is a complex thing. And the numbers are everything. The studies are everything. And if you're going to take a professional's face value, there's a lot of professionals that disagree reasonably. So please consider that. I believe I know what's going to happen here, and I understand that you're trying to do what you feel is the right thing, and consider taking one more step, contemplating the reality of common sense. I mean, common sense, if you take the Pareto analysis, I think it's called the 80-20 rule, 80% of the pollution in the lake is probably caused by 20% of the sources. I think we all probably understand that one. I think that applies here as well. So common sense, let that flow, let it flow. Because I know it's up there. I've talked to a lot of you. And I know that's been with your staff, it's all over you. So please consider this again carefully. Appreciate all the time.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, Sarah, you had a comment?
I just have a comment that just to keep in mind that the language of this ordinance is intended to reduce nutrients in the two major basins in Fayetteville, the Illinois River watershed and the White River watershed. So this addresses, Fayetteville is part of two watersheds.
Okay. Next.
I'm Richard Tiffany. I live on Willow Street. My property backs to the Sprout Spring branch. In the last couple of weeks, I've had a couple of staff people come out to talk about how the ordinance would affect my particular situation. I got a lot of my questions answered. I did end up with a couple of questions. One that wasn't answered, and that was in the city of Fayetteville, people are allowed to have a few chickens, 4 hens I think is and are 4 hens allowed in the riparian-zone, and just it says no livestock, but I guess pets are allowed. I didn't know there wasn't anything in particular about chickens.
Karen?
I was looking over at our city engineer because I don't know that we've discussed that completely. But my understanding would that they would be allowed. They currently, it's particularly in this case because he already has them. And what is prohibited in the ordinances, kennels or feedlots, and I just wanted to clarify that doesn't mean prohibit pets. I know someone mentioned that earlier. It really applies to commercial raising of pets. So if you're breeding or it's not for your 2 dogs that you put in a kennel.
Yeah, actually, I don't currently have any hens, but my son would like to have some, and he was the one that came up with the question. When
I'm sorry, Mr. Tiffany, you're going to have to bring me up to speed.
I was asking the question. I had a couple of staff people come out over the last couple of weeks, and they answered a lot of my questions. But a question that I asked that they didn't have an answer for is the 4 hens that are allowed in the city of Fayetteville, are they allowed in the riparian zone?
That's already answered.
Yes. Good enough. Thank you.
And being that we don't have them currently, they're not grandfathered in. Could we have them?
Depends on how old they are, probably. Go ahead.
And I think we need to probably clarify that as well within our best management practices manual, because we haven't had that question yet. And I think in the ordinance, you probably have to look how chickens are defined. I don't think it's something we're trying to regulate. It would be unintentional. So.
Okay. The next question I did get an answer for, but I own about 2/3 of an acre on 2 lots. One of them used to have a house, but it's vacant now, and the other one has a house that I'm doing some major renovations on. When they came out and measured that there was a small triangle that's maybe 2 feet deep and about 10 feet long, coming to a point that is between the street setback and the riparian zone setback, that I'd like to build a garage and have it a little bigger than this little triangle, and so I just wanted to verify that I have 2 years on a vacant lot. That it was separate lots, although I own it all now together, that to put up a garage and not be have the 2-year before the ordinance takes effect for this lot. I just wanted to verify that that was the case.
Okay.
That is correct. It's 24 months.
Okay. It's like 1/3 of an acre under the half-acre limit. The next question, kind of coming from the general discussion about phosphates here today, that it was talked about that there was statewide restriction in phosphates recently. I didn't catch exactly when, and I just wondered if the phosphate level in Beaver Lake had been measured since the statewide ban, to know that when we put the ordinance into effect, that isn't why we have less phosphates instead of contributing it all to the ordinance.
It was the banning of phosphates in dish detergent, and as to whether phosphate levels have been measured since that ban went into effect, I'm not sure. It was enacted in July 2010. I'm not sure if that means that's when it passed or when they were forced to comply. So David Jurgens or Beaver Water District might better be able to answer that question.
Maybe you got an answer for that.
Yes, I can. The state of Arkansas passed the law in 1994 banning phosphates from detergents. In any detergent, phosphate that we would measure would go through the wastewater treatment plants and be treated, and then would become part of that effluent, because all of it would be going through the wastewater treatment plant. So that would be a direct wastewater treatment impact upon the lake, rather than a non-point source type treatment or non-point source type impact that we're looking at here. As Bob Morgan said, in the 90s, we saw significant improvements in the amount of phosphorus discharge when the Nolan wastewater plant, when our wastewater plant was upgraded from the very rudimentary plant we had from the 60s to the Nolan plant in the 80s. It had a very, very stringent phosphorus limit.
Okay.
And I guess to finish up, there's no curb on my side of the street, and in my observation, I've got more water running onto my property from the street than runs off my property into the creek. I haven't looked at it a lot, every time, but the times that I've looked, there's more water coming in than going out. I feel like I'm doing a good job of filtering the water with my property. But when I look down the street at the corner of Spring and Willow, that there's huge amounts of water. They're coming down the street that are going into the creeks, and looking at how the general water flow is, and also the comments of a couple other people about erosion in their neighborhood from storm drain that were eroding their creek, that it wasn't their management practices that were eroding their stream bank, but it was stormwater coming in from other places, the streets and whatever, that I just wonder if maybe this ordinance is looking at the wrong place, that the majority, you know, if 90% of the water is coming in off the street, that putting the burden of trying to clean up this water from the small number of property owners that live along the creek is not going to address the problem, because that isn't really where the water's coming from. And just thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Can I ask Chris? Chris, can you describe the drainage criteria manual updates that we're foreseeing?
Certainly. That
just briefly related to that, I guess.
Yeah, related to that comment. I think, first of all, this ordinance, while it's not necessarily a major focus, and we haven't really talked too much about it, there are BMPs in the manual that talk about storm drainage that comes to the creek. We also have some other recent ordinance changes so that we don't have direct discharge into streams anymore. You have to first put it into a stilling basin or detention pond or something to slow the water down, so we don't have those pipes shooting directly into streams anymore. Again, that's in the BMP manual here. It's talked about just kind of peripherally in the ordinance, and it is also in other ordinances. Our drainage criteria manual is the manual that we use. It's got all the requirements, the technical requirements that back up these ordinances that talk about when development occurs, gives guidelines of how they have to design all of their pipes and storm drainage systems and all that sort of thing. And so what we're looking at with our update to our drainage criteria manual are enhanced detention ponds, for one, where right now the detention ponds don't really provide a lot of water quality benefit, but there are things you can do to the detention pond to make them provide more filtration and be a better water quality system. So many things like that we're looking at in our drainage criteria manual that, again, back up this ordinance and also back up some of our other storm drainage ordinances that we have in place.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Helen Garst, John's wife.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
I'm Helen Garst. I almost have laryngitis. A great man, George Bernard Shaw, said many years ago that a government that robs Peter to pay Paul can always count on the support of Paul. There is a huge presumption that government is doing what it's supposed to and that its decisions are fair and just. And I appreciate John Pennington's suggestion that we're neighbors and we want to cooperate and we want to get along and we want what's best for everyone. But the bottom line is that while property may be regulated to a certain extent, if regulation goes too far, it will be recognized as taking. And I don't want y'all to be in that position. I hope you'll vote against this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on.
I'm Charles Taunton, and I think I still live at 2900 North Pyrite. And I really would like to see that up there, if you will.
Well, there's my schedule for you.
The one with the round blue swimming pool. Zoom up it. Yeah, that one. As far as you can. Okay, you can see my back fence. I own an 80 by 150 foot lot. Goes from the center of that drainage ditch to the center of 17 feet west of the center of Pyrite Drive. Now, I told you earlier, if I step out of my back door onto that patio, I used to have a 42-inch stride. It's not quite that long now, but I can step into that 55 or that 50-foot zone. That takes up a full third of my lot, that 50-foot zone. So I have to come and ask permission to do anything other than keep what's there. I believe that this ordinance, if passed, will arbitrarily, unnecessarily, and severely restrict my use and enjoyment of what little bit of Fayetteville I own. I oppose this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Yes, come on in.
My name's Alan Long, and I live at 2075 West Archer. You'll probably all know what I'm going to say because the paper did an article on it. But in my particular situation, the stream actually surrounds my property on both sides. And recently, it just finished a major renovation of my property, and I added over 1,000 square feet. And so the property's at a size right now that really is not marketable in Fayetteville, so I can't just move to a different area where this ordinance doesn't really affect me. Like I said, I live in Waterman Woods, and I got the letter, I believe that was back in March, and then I was invited to the information session, which was very informative because we were able to ask Karen in the strategic planning division to come out to our property. And actually, just like the gentleman before me said, I can actually, before I step out of my back door, be into not just the 50-foot area, but the 25. So it really does restrict my property, and we really feel like it's an illegal taking without being compensated for the variance. I would really like to see happen is just a provision for property owners like myself that are so heavily impacted to that great of a percentage, to where it's actually in the ordinance that variances can be achieved, because when they actually came out, I was told I wasn't eligible for a variance because I wasn't receiving an undue economic hardship, which is what I've heard a lot here tonight, is that we would be able to apply for a variance, but I was told in the beginning that that wasn't the case. I'd like to ask for clarification on that.
Staff.
Right, no. Anyone can apply for a variance. I believe what we said was that it wasn't as black and white as a property that was made totally undevelopable by the buffer area. For example, you couldn't build a house or a
so anybody can apply
right,
for
anyone can apply for the variance.
Okay, because the barrier zone really does take about 90% of that property. And the plans were, which I was talking to them, to put in a pool. Not that it's all about the pool to me. To me, it's really about property rights as well. In addition, I had a biologist come to my house and to actually look at how, with the actual lack of grade in my yard and how it's pretty much on that entire side completely flat, he thought a 10% buffer zone would be more than enough to protect the stream bank. Something that I'd like to see, and I know you touched on it a little bit before, for another property owner that hadn't developed their property, they would have 24 months in which to acquire a building permit, I believe. But in my situation, I believe it would only be 18. Is that correct?
Okay.
Right, those sunset items apply to undeveloped lots. And in this case, the lot is developed, so it does not apply to this lot.
And that's another thing I would like the council to actually consider, is just considering extending that period. If it's okay to do within 18 to 24 months, but not say 36 months, I really don't see the difference of how it's benefiting the ecosystem. If you're saying you can do it, you just have to do it more quickly. That part doesn't make sense to me. The other thing is when they did an article in the paper about this, and I made the point of saying, I think this inversely affects my property value. What if the person buying my home was looking in my neighborhood and wanted to live in that neighborhood, and 3 or 4 houses in that neighborhood on the same stream have pools. If 2 were for sale, mine and theirs, and they wanted a pool, which would they buy? So I think it does affect my property values like that. And the paper was told that that was tenuous at best, but the study hadn't been done. Where are we if we don't do that study first? I think we owe it to the property owners. I really do. With that, I just want to say thank you guys for all the work you've done on this ordinance, and I think that it does have merit, but I think we need to slow down and look at how it can negatively impact some of us.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Sarah, you may.
Okay, a couple of points there I would like to bring up, because it's been repeated over and over, so I want to take a minute. So places like that, and Mr. Long mentioned Waterman Woods, that's in the Sang Valley. It's right upstream from Hamstring Creek. And those are sensitive areas. They have more of an impact on our water resources than other places. And this code, what it will do is allow guidance for staff to consider that these are more sensitive areas than other areas. All the same uses can continue. They can continue to do the pool. I don't recommend a pool in those areas. It really can destabilize the banks. And also has a chance for being flooded. But the other part is on property values. I want to mention that in some of the research is that per property there are studies that show that properties can sell, people are willing to pay up from $1,400 to $1,600 more per property with riparian buffer, and this was a study out of Missouri. And then that continued to increase to $6,000 more per property when outside of the buffer zone. So just having that vegetation, and this is repeated from realtors, that they have a better chance of selling a property if there's existing vegetation. So what I'm finding in the literature counters this idea that this would decrease property value. And we really looked at that in the research to understand those dynamics. So, and thank you.
Okay. Come on.
Hi, Mayor Jordan. Leif Kinberg, Ward 1. I spoke 2 weeks ago about some of the flooding issues I've got in my neighborhood, so I know you're very aware of that. I live on Town Branch, a tributary of the White River. My house was built in 1928. It flooded again on Sunday night when we had the rains. This ordinance does a great deal. It's a step in the right direction to reducing stream runoff by slowing the water that enters the stream channel. And so I think it is a strong step in the right direction. I think it needs to be carried further to some degree with greater protections for downstream property owners. I guess I brought some photos. I don't think I need to pass them out, but I've got I own both sides of the stream channel, and I've got erosion on all 3 areas, and directly due to cleaning the stream bank, cleaning vegetation up to the stream bank on both sides. I actually, let me hand these out to you, because I do want to show you. It's both sides. I've not controlled one side of the stream for some time, and so that's a side that this ordinance would help protect. Whenever it is sold, my property is sold, and so I do think it's important for that purpose. I'll be the first person to follow the ordinance when it is implemented, and I just want to reiterate my support for the ordinance, and I really do hope that stream bank erosion such as that will be taken care of through this ordinance, and that it will also prevent flooding downstream for residents. Unfortunately, it's been mentioned that if it was voluntary, that this would give properties up and down the streams the rights to make choices and implement these. if we implemented 60%, had a similar success rate to voluntary measures such as recycling, for example, there's still 520 streams, 520 properties on this channel that would would not comply with that. And in my mind, that is far too many in order for this to be a success. So again, I just want to say I support it, and I really do hope that you pass it. Thank you.
Yes. Sir, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
When you purchased this property, did you know that it was prone to flooding or could?
I did not.
You did not?
I did not. I can answer lots of questions about that. If you want to know all about the flood zone issues, I'd be happy to tell you.
You purchased property right adjacent to a stream. You never thought about the possibility of flooding?
It was certified as not being in a flood zone in the 100-year floodplain. That changed in 2008. It's a long story.
Well,
I'd be happy to talk
individually.
individually.
For you, really. After hearing it,
yeah.
Changed.
And so I've lost about $60,000 in property value, probably because of that change. And that was rezoned in 2008, which I think is a perfect example of what I hope this ordinance will move towards protecting from, because they keep expanding the flood zones out as open ditches on properties are closed in with pipes to drain that water off. That is what I hope this ordinance will help prevent, and so that folks like myself, first-time home buyers who went through the entire process in order to buy this home, do not run into that problem where they've lost thousands upon thousands of dollars in doing it. And there's really no solution to fixing it, honestly. And I think that is one of the things I'd like the council to leave here with today, is the recognition that there's certain properties that are being flooded up and down Town Branch, other streams along streams here in Fayetteville, and something certainly needs to be done to protect those properties and prevent future flooding. So I hope that there's further action in the future on this to reduce stream flow, flash flood events. The 50-foot buffer zone, although I realize many people are not in support of that and they feel like it's a taking of property rights, so to speak. I respect that feeling. I can understand it. I feel to some degree that obviously there will be other conditions on my property, but I think in the best interests of downstream residences, property owners who are losing soil due to erosion, losing value in their properties, that 50-foot buffer will help slow the water from flowing into the main channel and then flooding houses just like mine.
I got one more
Sure.
question for you. Play King Solomon for a second. I understand your problem. I've got a citizen just called me the other day, been flooded twice, lives near a creek. She's wanting, and she contends that the city did some work above stream on her and is causing this. Her exact words are, it's going to take a long time. She's talking about allocation of resources. Yeah. She said it's going to take a long time for this ordinance to have a significant effect. And she's telling me we should put more resources in taking care of acute problems than long term. What do you do there, King Solomon?
Key problems?
Acute problems.
Acute problems.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think this ordinance is to address acute problems. I think it's to address issues up and down. In my case, I would hope that, honestly, all the property owners along that stream would allow some of that vegetation to grow up and slow that water upstream. And this is particularly relevant to institutions, state institutions upstream, businesses that are simply not prepared to take that action in their own self-interest. They're focused on business interests and things like that, and this, I can respect that, but something has to protect my residents downstream as well, and I think this ordinance is the right step.
Brenda, you had a question, didn't you?
How long have you lived there or bought that? How many years?
I bought it in July of 2009.
Okay. All right. Because I was actually going to refer back to a development that was upstream from you that makes me support this ordinance.
Is there, still, is there a
I think we
question?
were on the same track there, being somewhat familiar with where you live and where this is. The velocity of the runoff there is coming probably from development. Would you agree? I mean, I'm thinking.
No, I actually don't agree. I think the
well,
majority.
You would know better than I. That's how come I'm trying.
Yeah,
to
well, I'm not a hydrologist, and I've spoken with many of the city staff here, who I feel are very knowledgeable and do have a strong sense of where that runoff is coming from. But I'm certain that many things compounded it. Non-pervious surfaces, soils, clays that are put in right along. Obviously, the development right upstream that we're aware of was built before this ordinance, and so therefore was built right up to the stream bank to prevent future developments like that. Maybe there won't be that many more, but on my stream anyway, on Town Branch, but there will be in other areas, I'm certain, and I think it's a strong measure to prevent that from happening, keeping those paved parking lots directly off of the stream itself.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melissa Terry, and I live in downtown Fayetteville in Ward 2. And first of all, just congratulate you guys and thank you for staying with this conversation. It's not happened quickly, like some people have said. This has been a very long conversation. Watershed luncheons, planning meetings, charrettes, etc. So this is sort of the 11th hour, and I appreciate you guys. One thing that I feel like it's important to clarify is that just in the context of property rights, excuse me, I'm just a little bit hoarse, but especially for the people who live around Beaver Lake, I think it's important to clarify that it's not a lake, it's a reservoir. There was a white river there that property owners lived on and farmed on, and they gave that up so that we could have Beaver Lake. And originally it was about flood control and power generation, excuse me. So I just want y'all to keep that in mind. And so our ecosystem services that we're building in this ordinance go to protect the water quality of our reservoir. And a couple of the property rights supporters have mentioned that we should let Mother Nature do what she would do best and not fool with it. Well, if that were the case, there wouldn't be a dam, and there would be a white river, and then we wouldn't be having this discussion. So anybody who's ever put a boat or had fun on Beaver Lake or gone out to the Buffalo River and had a good time, like these are examples of how like we all pull together, and property rights is a mutual discussion. We can't parcel it out when it just applies to us. So for the people in the Beaver Lake watershed or on the lake itself, I'd just like to remind them that what they don't see is the beautiful riverbed, the big cherry trees, the big walnut trees that were there that you can go look up historically, that we made a deal as a region. This is what we're going to do. And so Fayetteville is taking the lead and making a deal as a city that this is how we're going to protect it. So thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, David Orr, 1564 West Cedar Street. I want to thank the City Council and thank all the folks who have been involved and instrumental in bringing this ordinance to the point where we're at tonight. Fayetteville continues to show its leadership in the region and in the state of Arkansas. Even though some people are critical that here we are doing something that no other community in this state has done, I think shows that there's forward-looking people that are very active and involved in this city. I thank the city staff, and thank you members of the council, and thank the members of the Environmental Action Committee. When I saw the slides earlier this evening about the Pyrite Drive, I felt that the landowners, I felt for the landowners there, because to see what has been done with that stream, it's been turned into a concrete sluice. That is the epitome of bad stream management, and we can't easily go back and fix that, and I hope that we don't ever see that kind of horrific urban misdesign being repeated in this community, because it is old style thinking. And what this ordinance is attempting to do is bring some new style thinking that's based on all of the scientific knowledge that has been accumulated in this country and other countries. But the folks on Pyrite Drive, I think, illustrate the reason why this ordinance is needed. They're not being told to do anything. They're already there. But they have an opportunity to take advantage of the education that we're all getting through these 3 hearings that I appreciate you sitting through. And that is that even though they have a straight line concrete ditch, a concrete channel behind their homes, they could go out there and be guerrilla gardeners, if you will, and plant some trees, put some shade out over that, help to slow down the velocity of the water. Because the reality is that with our climate changing as it is, we all see that evidenced currently. With our climate changing, we're going to have larger flooding events. We're going to have longer droughts too. But with the more intense floods that we're going to be experiencing, people who live downstream of these concrete channels and living downstream of the parking lots that are dumping all of this water off at once, those folks are going to be suffering. Mr. Kinberg, for example, he's a perfect example of what we're going to be seeing a lot more of. So this is an opportunity for Fayetteville to get out in front again, do something necessary, and something that all these other communities are going to have to do sooner or later. Hopefully Washington County will follow the city's lead, hopefully Benton County, and we will start to see some real positive management. We've heard about phosphorus, nitrogen, nutrients, total organic carbon, and yes, turbidity. One thing that wasn't mentioned in this discussion tonight was trihalomethanes. That's a class of chemicals that are created, in this case, when you chlorinate water. And that is something that is a carcinogenic compound or a class of compounds. And the more chlorine that you dump into water to treat it, to bring it up to standards of drinking water, the more of these carcinogenic compounds you get. Now, I remember when I first started tasting that blue-green algae taste back in the 1970s in the summertime. That's the way that stuff is being killed is with chlorine. The more nutrients that go in, the more of those blue-green algae, the more trihalomethanes. I thought I'd heard it all, but tonight we've been told that not only are the communists out to get us with this, but ticks, snakes, and the evil people from the Beaver Water District. I happen to know a number of those Beaver Water District people, and I guarantee you that they are not a threat. What is the threat is failure to act, and I implore you to take action this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Anybody else?
I'll be Shepherd, and I hope there's nobody else wants to talk, but it's great when everybody gets to. Thank you for being so patient. I wanted to mention a couple of things that maybe weren't said, and one is, in all the rights, property rights talk, what year did anybody from Europe show up and actually take possession of property on this continent? I mean, we're pretty amazing people to talk about it as though we have displaced other human beings to make them walk through Fayetteville on the Trail of Tears from the East Coast area to get out to Oklahoma. I mean, I don't feel that way about the land. I value the little bit I own very much and treasure it, but I know it's not really mine. It's going to be here long after I'm gone. And I just can't think about it as that way. And another thing, I certainly want to say I'm so grateful to have Leaf. I wish he'd been in our neighborhood 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. You remember Brenda? He's a great spokesman for it. I'm sorry he's a victim of what we failed to get done because there was not this ordinance in 2000 or 2003 or 5. Also, Leaf has looked at, I think, that Fayetteville High School is using underground storage where they removed Bates School. Have you driven by and seen the little low concrete thing out there with the holes in it facing Martin Luther King? We have no idea what they've guessed the amount of stormwater they need to hold, so they won't send more stormwater to Lee's house. On that other thing, last thing, I guess, I spend endless hours out in tall grass. I was out there today looking for some seed pods you can't see in the summer because honeysuckle hides. But anyway, I seldom get a tick. And I can't find a snake if I want to see one because they're in that tall grass and they're scooting away when I start coming through there. I'm an unnatural critter out there. So thank you, and I hope you can agree, all of you can vote for this and know you are doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Is there anyone else that would like to? Okay. Is there anybody else that'd like to talk? I mean, would you? Besides.
Go ahead.
All right, go ahead.
All right, my name is Hayes Hudson, and I appreciate the time you've given us all. I'm a resident of Crystal Springs on Pyrite Drive. I'm the HOA president, and I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. I was just listening, but I'm not a good speaker. So, but I didn't care for someone saying that the residents of Pyrite Drive are the reason that this ordinance is needed. The residents of Pyrite Drive is the exact reason that the ordinance, the way it's written now, is not needed. Just because we're against the ordinance doesn't mean we're against clean water by any means or an ordinance of this measure. But I think there needs to be more into the grandfathering for the homes that are set in place now. New subdivisions that are built with the buffering zone, excellent. Homes now where 100% of their backyard is going to be in that area, I don't support that at all. And I think there could be a compromise. It doesn't have to be a yes or no. It could be a yes with a compromise that houses that are already there, if the 50 feet is going to take up 100% of their yard, then that's an exception, and then that needs to be, they only can take up 50% of their yard, or they're only susceptible to the 25 feet, not the full 50. I feel like there can be more in here, and we can make it work for everybody, and everybody can be happy. I know that's not always possible, but more people be happy, and it's taking people's rights away right now. It really seems like to me. I hope you vote no for the ordinance the way it's stated and worded now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Well, all righty then. I will bring it back to the council. We certainly did speed things up tonight. I did a very good job of that, didn't I?
We did.
I tried. Okay. But we want to take public comment, so. All right, now we're back to the council. Well, gang, let us begin.
I'll start.
All right, Matthew.
I'm actually glad that I get to go first because I want to start from a point of agreement, even though I know I don't agree with anybody with everybody in the room. I think almost everybody here can agree that water quality is important to us, and we need to have a plan for handling the nutrients entering our water supply. We disagree on what that plan should look like. We disagree on how comprehensive it should be and what components should be a part of it, but at least at that point we can agree. Now I'll talk about what we disagree on. I think the idea that education alone will be enough to protect our water supply or to handle virtually any other problem the city faces, whether it's environmental or economic or otherwise. I think that's unrealistic. Education is an important part, but it can't handle these problems alone. I think the science is pretty clear that this ordinance is going to help protect our water supply into the future. Gentleman asked if there was any doubt in my mind that this ordinance would be effective. Sure, I'm willing to admit that possibility. I'm also willing to admit the possibility that the sun may not rise tomorrow, but you reach a point when you're talking about science where you have to start dealing in likelihoods, not in absolutes. We have multiple studies that we've reviewed. They're peer-reviewed. They've been published in scientific journals, and they're written by researchers at accepted, credentialed research institutions. I think if we're going to talk about likelihoods, we have to accept that the science is sound. Will this ordinance be enough? No way. This is only a part of our nutrient reduction plan. I think education is a big part. I think education is a big part. I think partnership is a big part. And I think there are other pieces of the puzzle besides those. So this is only one step. And I don't think anyone is proposing that this is a one-size-fits-all solution. The fact is, if we don't follow a comprehensive nutrient reduction plan, which is based on science, not on anecdotes or hyperbole, it's going to cost us millions down the road. Every citizen in this county will be on the hook for that if we don't get started on a comprehensive plan. We know that to be fact. This is a modern problem created by the buildup of modern infrastructure, and it's going to require a modern approach. Doing nothing is not an option. I am not willing to take the slim chance that doing nothing will be okay and rest on it. I need more likelihood than that. I think it's a well-crafted ordinance. I think the variance process will allow for every justifiable exemption, and I think we've heard examples of a few of those tonight. You have to take that on faith. I'm sorry I can't promise you that a future council or a future planning commission is going to think that your requested exemption is justifiable, but I trust in the process, and I think you should too. I think this ordinance is important. It forms an important part of that comprehensive strategy, and I'm going to be very proud to vote yes for it.
Okay, who else? Bobby.
I would agree with you on one thing. Matthew, just in the last of this, you know, we got 5 miles outside the city and other things. First thing I'd like to do is to re-say water quality is very important to all of us. I'd like to address a comment from one of the people that talked about somebody being against the Beaver Water District. I have no problem with the Beaver Water District. If I have a problem, I know the commissioner who represents Fayetteville, I'll call him. My problem is that I served on the Water and Sewer Committee for 4 years, and numerous times during agenda sessions when an expenditure came up about us spending money, which we've spent, like, I asked for a report. I got $3,071,458 out of that spent between 2005 and 2011 on things dealing directly and indirectly with the Illinois, but for the most part, the White River watershed. $3,071,458, $1,227,776. So, as everybody here knows me, when these things would come up at agenda session, I'd see water study here, this much money, this much here. And I would ask, and lightning can come striking down through this ceiling if I'm not telling the truth. And there are other councilmen here that remember this also. I was told Beaver Water District wants us to do this, and the EPA, if we're going to get our NPDES permit, we want the EPA to see that we're taking favorable steps, okay? That's the reason that I mentioned the Beaver Water District. The next thing is, I see in the paper where a spokesman, I think Mr. Hubbard, it's attributed to him from EPA, says that doesn't have any bearing on the NPDES. But I'll look anybody in this room in the eye and tell them I was repeatedly told That's the reason for a lot of these expenditures, $3,071,000, including federal money. Okay. I just had to get that out of the way first. You know, I used to work around the legislature a lot back in the old days. Matter of fact, before term limits, and they used to have a whistle in the legislature that came from the 20s or 30s, and it was Frisco Train Company gave it to them. And when something was coming through there on a fast track that was going to be passed, somebody would hide and blow that whistle, and it sounded like a train. And the only time I ever had heard it blown was a bill I was working on, just happened to be working on, and it was a deregulation bill as opposed to a regulation bill, and it passed 98-1. But before they vote, you could hear this whistle blowing. Well, I've heard the whistle blowing. I know that this is not going to be stopped. But there's just a couple more points I want to make. The part about the city and the trails. I sent an email to the director of trails asking about trails in or near the riparian zone. And Matt, I don't know whether he's here, but I'm sure everybody at that table's got copies. And I said, anyway, Matt said, I've been working on gathering the data, and I'm going to skip down, and he says, with the 35-foot buffer zone from stream center line, we've got 1.78 miles of existing trails in the buffer out of the total of 18 miles of multi-use trails in Fayetteville. The distance also includes trails, bridges, and tunnels, including long tunnel under the Fulbright Expressway, accounting for 0.22 miles of this ordinance. Remember, I asked for the number of trails that were in the riparian zone or close to the proposed zone. I said current and future. Now here's the one that I hang my hat on. For future trails, we had an even greater challenge gathering the data since the exact location of the trail is unknown until a design and property acquisition is completed. We decided to just look at all future trails that are following a stream corridor that will be affected by the proposed ordinance. This comes to 22 miles of the 100 miles of the trail proposed in Fayetteville Alternative Transportation and Trails Program. I think it boils down logically, if you've got an easement there and you don't have to go buy money, follow the money. You know, you don't have to buy the property, you got an easement there. But when we impose this on the citizens and then we go along and run alternative transportation through close to our creeks, I don't think it stands the test. And I know that probably Mr. Marr is going to take me to task as soon as I get done with this. But anyway, I had to say it. I have a copy for the money spent if the councilman would like a copy of it. Like I say, $3 million and well, I guess I'll say one more thing and then shut up. We talked about variances tonight. I don't know how many people in here have gone to get a variance. Oftentimes we hear people talk about, well, just go down and get a variance. You know, occasionally that happens. I would say a lot of times it's not that easy. And if you don't believe me, just go ask somebody that's had to go down and get a variance and ask them how easy it is. Once again, I want clean water and I want this and that, but you know, I won't support this ordinance. Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Regarding that. Bobby, you had mentioned the trails, and I want to bring up a little bit of the history and the conversation around that, because in the Fayetteville Forward Economic Development Summit, which was I guess in '09, the citizens that brought this forward, that was one of the initial complaints that brought this ordinance forward, was this that this had to cover not just citizens but city activities. And I'm going to pick on Aubrey. He was probably the loudest one that this had to cover the city too, and so the language, the city has to follow these codes too. And what this means is, in the process of choosing paths for trails, is that there will be an effort on the part of the city to look for areas, easements, to put the path further away from the banks of the river. Just like with the citizen situation, when all other options are explored and there's no other option, only then can you go through a variance process basically and explore something else. But first and foremost, there has to be an effort to move that trail off of the bank outside of these riparian areas. And then I have a question in regard to the numbers. What percent, can I ask a question to the staff, Mayor?
Yes, you may.
What percent of the trail, like, and that was interesting. I thought, so he's talking about miles, but what's the percent of the current and the future trails?
Actually, slightly less than 10% of the existing trail system is in the first 25 feet. It's about 9.6%. The future trails corridor, which Alderman Farrell spoke about 22% of the anticipated trail usage is along a stream corridor, not necessarily within the 25% or 25-foot corridor yet. And the reason being is that it's not like the master street plan where we have a hard line on a map that says this is exactly where the road is going to go. To his point, though, is I think that we do acquire easements. Many times we look for utility easements that have been already in existence and obtained where the land is already being disturbed. You know, one of the things that we have found is that we do have problem areas where we have built within that area that we're already seeing deterioration. And, you know, we have an example of the city not doing it well and needing to move it outside of that 25%. Mayor Jordan, who was an alderman at the time, and myself, who was an alderman at the time, learned through that experience. That's part of why we're having this discussion. But the reality is this, for the people that look at the trail system, Skull Creek Trail would not exist today if we would not have had a variance process to build it within the area in certain circumstances. Because it's in the core of the city, the only way you would have gotten a trail in some portions of this land would have been whether or not it qualified for a variance. So just like a resident is going to request a variance in certain situations, the city may in certain situations.
And it's my understanding that with this ordinance, there's a best management practices manual that can be used that wasn't there before.
That is correct.
And that's a huge part of the tool that this has created.
That is correct. And to the prior administration's credit, one of the things that they looked at, obviously, one of the biggest costs in trail construction is land acquisition. So as they looked at acquiring that land, often it was donations. It was areas that allowed the trails to be built. And so in an effort to get the plan in place, you know, those areas were taken. We learned from that. And I think the message to send when people want to say that it's not a double standard. I mean, there may be times that we're going to have a variance request, but where we can move it back, particularly in this future 22%, we're looking at that already. Because you can go along the existing trail corridor and see the very issue that we're talking about within this ordinance. There's a section between North Street and Gregg Street that is already have a deterioration process that we are evaluating whether we can move that further back if we have to reconstruct that trail.
Thank you.
She's done. All right, Bob.
I was just going to say, while I was studying this, took note the other day when I opened the newspaper. It shows a picture of Wilson Park. It talks about the lights. And if you'll notice that impervious concrete sidewalk running through there, right down here, and I know it's more than 50 feet, but right down here is the water. So, you know, it's once again, I guess we're trying to get away from that now, but we need to be consistent. Thanks.
Okay, who will be next? Adele.
Well, I've enjoyed this discussion.
Me too.
I have enjoyed getting to know more and more citizens. I found it quite interesting that I kept the numbers, and the numbers exactly balanced. We had exactly 23 speakers for and 23 speakers against. So I thought that was very interesting. I think there have been many, many excellent points tonight. I hope that we certainly do remember that variances can happen, and don't take a pessimistic view that they're not going to be granted, because and you can come and talk to me and remind me that I said this to you also. But I think that, you know, there have been plenty of examples about when people were asked to sacrifice, or, you know, this is one of those times. And I know that those 300 people don't feel like it's fair that it's them, but, you know, it may be the others of us at the next time. So thank you so much, and I will be supporting this ordinance.
Okay. Oh, I'll go next, I guess.
Okay.
And it's hard, it's so late, I'm not gonna add to what other people have said. One thing that's, you know, I want to add to this is, you know, water quality is a very important aspect of this ordinance, protecting our water quality, but also, you know, stream bank erosion, which also, I mean, but stream bank erosion, how it affects property owners that live downstream whenever their banks are eroded. And, you know, over the past 10 years that I've been on this council, I've seen quite a few developments go through, and one in particular that ultimately did affect, you know, a major waterway in the south part of town. And I, you know, I worked with engineers, and some of the problems we had, I mean, some of the things occurred because the development didn't go through like it should have, but the engineers, the city engineer, the one previous to the one we have now, dealt with issues, and so much time and effort was spent trying to make these developers do the right thing. And, you know, I think they tried to, but you can't build that close to the stream, parking lots, and not affect, you know, the runoff. So I feel like that these buildings this new building setback basically is what this amounts to, is a good thing. I think it will help in some situations, and it's certainly one of the reasons I support this, and as well as many others. But and I do appreciate the property rights issues and people feeling like that, who feel like that they won't be able to do everything with their property they would like to do. But I again, want to emphasize the variance process. The city has no intentions of not allowing someone to develop a piece of property or make it totally undevelopable. And I don't think we can do that. So I feel like that the variance process is going to work, and so I will support this.
Yes.
Well, this one's been fun. There is a lot of bad about this ordinance in my mind. There's also a lot of good. And I think to Adele's point about talking to different people, I'm probably up to several hundred. I'm sure people up here are the same, and talking to people through email or calls or getting stopped in the street or in restaurants or whatever. Everybody's got an opinion, and it's not really about counting them up or whatever for me. It's about listening to the points, and there's been some fantastic points made. Some education points on both sides, what we could do to educate people. There's also been the thought process of, a guy said, would you want to drive on 540 every day if you just encouraged people not to speed? I mean, if there was, you know, I wouldn't want to do that. And so there are good points being made all over the place. And the fact is, this council, in my opinion, should be proud that we're wanting to act, because we could delay this. I mean, we could delay this for a few years. We could put it on the next council. We could delay this for 10 years. We could put this on the city councils 2 or 3 or 4 times from now, and Alderman Teal might be on that council, or Bobby might be on that council. But at this rate, I'm not really sure if I'll be, just from a time perspective. But we could also put this thing off for a generation. I mean, we could. And the problem with that is I don't want to go to my son and say, you know, in 25 years, say, look, son, guess what you get to deal with now? There's 800,000 people in Northwest Arkansas, and I know your water's really expensive, the parts you actually have left. I mean, I don't want to do that. There are billionaires around this country buying up fresh water at a staggering pace. There's one in Oklahoma buying freshwater lakes and putting huge, real high metal fences around them. He's not doing anything with them right now. He's keeping them because he thinks water will become a commodity, literally traded in his lifetime. And that's a scary thought, and it's paramount we take care of our water. I wouldn't support this if it wasn't for the grandfathering wording that I've read several times. I would not support it if it wasn't for the variance process that we have in place. I do have confidence, I think Alderman Petty said, to have confidence in city staff of looking at things fairly and objectively, and I do believe in that. I think we need to believe in that. Fayetteville, to me, is a thought leader, an action leader in Northwest Arkansas, always has been. That's why I've loved living here all my life. And we don't just lead in thought, we lead in action. And I think action is just as important sometimes than just putting thought out there. And I'm proud of that. I think it's time for action. I think it's time for us to lead. It is my hope that other communities will enact some version of this ordinance. But it is also my belief that none of them will ever do that unless Fayetteville does it first. For that, I'll support it.
Mark?
Well, I'm not going to go on because it's late, but I have given this a lot of, I think, very fair and deliberate study. And based on the public input, which for me has been about 2 to 1 to support it, and based on a lot of empathy with those people that are individually impacted by this because it is their property. And once you see how it impacts the people over here that it is in their backyard, you do understand that it is personal and that it is immediate, and I have a great deal of empathy for that. But looking at the science behind this, looking at problems that we're dealing with because we didn't handle issues in the past, and hopefully preventing these issues in the future, after a great deal of deliberate thought and study, I will be supporting this.
Okay, Ron.
I'll be happy to go next. This has been very, very difficult for me. I feel like I've put a lot of time and effort, as we all have, into this. I've paid most close attention to Ward 4 residents, and I've done my best to respond and reply and to look some of you up. I've made phone calls, and I've tried to treat everyone with the most respect I could, like I believe we all have. I have doubted my decision on both sides of this, wake up one day and feel one way, wake up another, based on a large number of friends I have who are extremely brilliant people, lawyers, engineers, my dad who lives on Beaver Lake and is a preacher, and my West Texas family who lives in an area where water is a wonderful resource and a problem for them. I have listened to so many people in so many ways. I don't feel like I have the history that Alderman Farrell has, and I have so much respect for his opinion. That's been tough for me to know that he was going to have some really good data and history and all of that. So it's been very, very tough, but I believe that the Ward 4 constituents that I visited with, those in favor outnumbered those not in favor. I believe this is a planning tool, and that I was elected to help be a planner, and that this is a planning tool that protects our most precious resource and looks to the future, which is what I wanted to do on this council. I believe that if that poster over there is right and it takes 500 years to make an inch of soil, we don't have any time to waste. I hope my property still exists after I'm long gone and someone else takes good care of it too. I am going to vote to support this, and I'm proud to be a part of this council at this time.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to leave everybody out there and the mayor not take a position. I think as the mayor, I'm sorry, Sarah.
May I make some comments?
Well, you sure may.
You always sort of round things out, so I don't want to be. Okay. I'll keep it brief. I want to point out that in the budgeting process, I asked the staff to create line items that delineated the amount of spending that this city spends on drainage, and that includes $1.1 million in stream restoration. The reason we have to spend $1.1 million in stream restoration is because, as most urban areas, we have created lots of impervious surface, meaning concrete, roofs, this kind of thing. And we have done that right up to our waterways, as Mr. Kimberg was describing. And so downstream people are being affected, and the rest of us also included in that are paying $1.1 million in tax dollars to fix the error of not leaving vegetation in place to help us with our water management. It's cheaper to use roots than it is to go in and cement and trapezoid a ditch. I would rather have trees and vegetation as my option for managing the water in my property than I would to have the city come in, which seems much more intrusive, and to have them come in and cement and ditch and hardscape to fix the banks that are so highly eroded because of the designs that we've been doing in the past. I am definitely interested in the economic benefits of this type of thing. This is one tool to help us move towards being better stewards of the land, but also using ecosystem services, they're called. I mean, that means you use the ecosystem and the functions that it has as tools in your resource management. And that's way cheaper than hiring an engineer and having them come in and design a ditch. And so that is what has driven this process for me, but also because I'm interested in saving us money, and I think these types of things save the community money. And $1.1 million in stream restoration is an example of that. This is also citizen-driven. This would not be on the table today without the people who 400, a fraction of those broke off of there and said, we want to focus on green infrastructure, using those ecosystem services to help us manage our resources, our water resources. Those people pushed this to bring it here today. And as a representative of the city of Fayetteville, I said I would represent it, and I have. The last thing I want to bring up is the thing that was so powerful to me, and it relates to what Justin was saying, is there's a letter that we received from a high school student that gave me goosebumps, and I'm getting them now, that she was adamant about the fact that she would be living in this community, and that she hoped that we would manage our resources so that she could enjoy them later. And if that isn't enough reason to do this, then I don't know what is.
Okay, anybody else? Well, as we close this evening, it's almost the next day. you know, a lot of things that swirl through my head, and I certainly want to thank my staff for developing this ordinance. I want to thank the citizens who participated in this debate. I want to thank the city council. I know the hours have been long. A report, I don't remember if it was Joel or who asked me the other day what I thought, and I said, this much I know about the city council that I serve with, that they will listen to both sides of the argument and they will craft the best ordinance they know how to craft, and I believe you have done that. You know, I sat in a U.S. conference of mayors with mayors from all over the United States a few months ago in Washington, D.C. And there was three things that was top priorities among all the mayors, from New Jersey from Dallas, L.A., Georgia, you name it. The number one priority that they had was jobs. And number two and number three, they were just almost neck and neck, was one was transportation, and believe it or not, alternative transportation measures. And right with it was conservation of water. They said at that meeting that in the next 10 years, 36 states are going to face water issues, water concerns. They said, we need to act now. We talk about, you know, controlling property rights and controlling people's lives, but I want to read you something. Sandra Smith, when I did an interview with her earlier this week, brought an old ordinance book with her. Here's an ordinance. It says, all owners of grounds or other yards within the city and all persons renting or leasing any lots, yards, or other grounds within the city are forbidden to suffer stagnant water to stand or remain on any part of the said premises, and they shall be required, whenever the city health officer shall deem it necessary, to cause said lots, yards, or other grounds to be leveled or raised, additional earth, or otherwise to be drained, so that the stagnant water be not allowed to remain or flow onto adjacent lots. That was passed on July the 8th, 1913. So the city of Fayetteville, I mean, and I started going through these, there's a dog tag. They came in and said you can no longer have outhouses on your property. You've got to hook up to city. I mean, I'm not doing this to be cute, but what I'm trying to say is that the city of Fayetteville has been doing this for at least 100 years, making these types of ordinances. Because when you live in a city and you're so close together, you have to have certain regulations and ordinances. If we lived in a perfect world, and I regarded your rights more than mine, or you regarded my rights more than yours, we would live in a perfect society. But it's when I decided my rights are more important than yours that we have to create ordinances and laws and have government to institute these laws to make it as best we know how for the largest number of people in the city. And that's our job. And that's not an easy job. It's not easy to sit through, what have we sat through? 9, 10, 11, 12 hours of debate on this. But we come in a time now that water is going to be a prized commodity in this, not only just in this region, but in the world. And they said if you're not having water issues in your region, then all these other places that are having water issues will be coming to your area to live. So now is the time to get on top of it. When we talk about property rights, I remember reflecting back on my career as an alderman, and I think most of the aldermen up here and a lot of the public knows my record on environmental issues, my voting record. But I want you to keep in mind, we heard property rights issues about the water tank on Canterbury. Everybody remember that? Impact fees. We heard the same arguments about the hillside ordinance. The smoking ban. and rezonings that we've done all over the city. I can remember that on Maxwell, one time we actually zoned 2 apartment complex in the neighborhood, and the neighbors said it's going to affect our property values, but the council made that decision to do that. Wasn't easy. And you know, I believe that this council is strong enough and fair enough. If there's any mistakes, they will bring it back, look at it, change it. Right now, I respect their decision. If I was an alderman on this council today, I would support this. If the vote was tied today, I would vote in favor of it. So I want you all to know that. And with that, Sandra, would you call the roll?
Tennant?
Yes.
Farrell?
No.
Adams?
Yes.
Lewis? Yes. Gray?
Yes.
Teal?
Yes.
Kenyon?
Yes.
Petty?
Yes.
All right, it passes. Is there any announcement from the council? Anything else you'd like to discuss tonight? Are you sure you don't want to go into those outhouses or something? All right, with that, we are adjourned.